I had just turned 24 when I landed my first real design job at a boutique agency in Portland's Pearl District. It was the kind of place that looked great on a resume: exposed brick, reclaimed wood, and an open floor plan that felt perpetually busy. I was excited, full of nervous energy, ready to prove myself. I thought I'd be fighting impossible deadlines, not fighting a pervasive, growing sense of dread. Then Marcus arrived. He was introduced as a temporary data entry specialist, brought in to help with the backlog for maybe 3 weeks. He was mid-20s, tall and angular, with watery blue eyes that seemed to absorb the light, and a disturbing habit of unblinking stillness. He was placed at a desk near the kitchen, giving him a direct sightline to my workstation, and I felt his presence immediately. It wasn't his appearance that unsettled me. It was the total lack of casual human kinetic energy. When he wasn't typing, his hands rested perfectly flat on the desk, not tapping, not shifting. He moved like a deep-sea diver, slow and deliberate. The first sign that something was truly off came with the mirroring. It started subtly, an unconscious replication of my actions. I'd stretch my arms over my head to relieve the tension of a deadline, and 30 seconds later, I'd glance over and see him performing the exact same stretch, same angle, same duration. I started testing it. I would tap my pen against my notepad in a strange 3-beat rhythm. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Within a minute, I'd see his keyboard hand mimic that rhythm perfectly. It felt like watching a reflection that was slightly delayed and completely malicious. I began making awkward, unnecessary movements, scratching my ear twice, cracking my knuckles in a specific order, and he followed every single one. I was being studied, cataloged, and replicated. The feeling of being observed intensified drastically 2 weeks in. I arrived early on a Monday and found a sticky note pressed flat against my monitor. There was no message, just a tiny, detailed doodle of a rocket ship next to my name. It was my signature doodle, the little ship I absent-mindedly drew during every boring conference call, during phone banks, while waiting for Photoshop renders. It was a private tick. I had never drawn it for anyone at the office. Yet there it was, perfectly replicated, even down to the slightly whimsical smoke plume. That note was the first direct, undeniable violation. Then came the physical intrusions. My favorite navy blue jacket, which I had carelessly draped over my chair, was meticulously folded and placed inside my drawer. My lunch, forgotten in the fridge Friday, showed up on my desk Monday morning, wrapped in plastic wrap and still cold. The final straw was the coffee creamer, my specialized, obscure vanilla hazelnut blend, which I special ordered and kept in a locked caddy at my desk, was suddenly stocked in the communal kitchen. When I asked our office manager, she said, "Oh, Marcus mentioned you liked it and asked if we could order some for the office." I hadn't spoken 10 words to him. I certainly hadn't discussed my preference for an expensive, specialty creamer. He was gathering data on me, and he was doing it actively. The following Friday, I had to take a drastically different commute due to construction on my usual bus line. I was standing at the second transfer stop, hot, irritated, and feeling paranoid. Across the street, parked perfectly parallel to the curb, was an unfamiliar silver sedan. And inside, perfectly still, was Marcus. He was sitting at 10 and 2 on the wheel, watching me through the windshield with that unblinking stare. When my bus pulled up and I got on, he didn't follow. He just lifted one hand, performing that same slow, deliberate wave from the office kitchen. I couldn't go to HR yet. I sounded insane. But the fear was real. I started taking precautions, changing parking structures, leaving at unpredictable times, using ride shares. For 1 week, the office felt normal again. Then my phone buzzed late on a Tuesday night. Unknown number. I answered, and after 3 seconds of dead air, I heard it. His voice, almost normal, but laced with a quiet intensity. "The 47 bus is back running," Marcus said. "You should take it tomorrow. Better for the environment." He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the phone, trembling. I had never given him my number. I had never told anyone at work about my bus route, yet he knew the specific number. I filed a formal report the next day. Marcus calmly denied everything. The agency reassigned him, and I was told the matter was closed. But that night I came home to find my apartment door unlocked. I always double-locked. And on my kitchen counter, next to the fruit bowl, sat my spare key, the one I kept hidden in a fake rock outside my building. Sleep was impossible. The final confrontation arrived at 2:17 a.m. on a Sunday. I woke to a soft, metallic scraping. I lay frozen in bed, then slowly turned my head toward the window. Marcus was on my fire escape, not trying to break in, just sitting cross-legged, his face pressed against the glass, backlit by the distant streetlights. When he saw me looking, he smiled, that same closed-mouth, unsettling smile, and pressed his palm flat against the window. Then I heard his voice, perfectly clear despite the glass. "I fit so well here, don't I? Like I was always meant to be here." I screamed, a raw, terrified sound. He didn't run, he just tilted his head, stood up with that signature underwater slowness, and climbed down the fire escape. The police found nothing, no forced entry, no prints on the key, but they did find his car 3 blocks away, unlocked, engine cold. Inside, on the passenger seat, was a file folder with my name. Inside were printed out copies of my social media, my grocery store loyalty card purchases, a log of my bus times, and a hand-drawn, meticulous map of my apartment building with my unit circled in red. They also found the final sticky note confirming my worst fears. Intern access codes don't work on private files, but managerial temp access does. He had used his clearance to pull HR records, security logs, and God knows what else. They never found Marcus. His file was fake. His references were burner phones. He had walked into my life, gathered everything, and then vanished. I moved 3 weeks later, but I'll never truly feel safe. I still don't take the same route twice because I know somewhere, someone might be mapping it. I was 26 when I took a junior accounting role at a small insurance firm in suburban Pennsylvania. The office was aggressively beige, fluorescent lights, gray cubicles, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. That was exactly what I wanted after a chaotic upbringing. Predictability felt like safety. Then Tom started in IT. He was early 30s, broad-shouldered, with a quietness that didn't feel calm but contained. He wasn't creepy in any obvious way. He was just there. If I went to the kitchen, he'd appear to check the router. If I worked late, he'd be running updates. It wasn't worth reporting. He always had a reason, and he never spoke unless spoken to. But I started noticing other things. My computer would wake from sleep when I hadn't touched it. Files I'd left open were neatly closed. Once, after I mentioned a glitchy spreadsheet to my manager, Tom appeared at my desk within minutes. "I saw the ticket," he said. "I can fix it remotely." I hadn't submitted a ticket. The small things added up. He knew my schedule. He commented on my lunch choices. "You like the turkey from Delmar's? Good place." I'd never brought the bag into the office. He mentioned my commute once. "Route 30's faster before 8. I'd never told him where I lived. When our senior accountant retired, I agreed to cover her Saturday shift for the overtime. Tom was the only other person scheduled. Server maintenance, they said. I arrived at 7:50 a.m. to find his car already in the lot, the only one. The storm rolled in around 11. The sky turned that sickly green-gray, and by 11:47, the power flickered and died. The emergency lights kicked on, casting the office in a jaundiced glow. My phone showed no service. The storm had taken out the tower. I went to find Tom. He was sitting perfectly still at his desk, watching the front doors. "We should leave," I said. "The roads are going to flood." Tom finally turned to look at me. "Can't," he said, almost gently. "I triggered the lockdown protocol. It's safer inside." What protocol? New security feature. I installed it last month. He held up his keycard. Doors seal automatically in a crisis. External threat mitigation. He said it like he was proud of it. The system's mine. I can't unlock it until the threat level clears. My stomach dropped. Tom, that's not a real thing. You can't just... It's for your protection, he interrupted, still calm. You work so hard, you shouldn't have to worry about external variables. I ran to the back exit. The panic bar was locked, not chained, but deadbolted. A small LED panel glowed red. Admin lockout active. I remembered the safety manual. The fire exit couldn't be overridden without Tom's admin credentials. I was trapped by a system I'd never known existed. I tried the landline. Dead. I went to the break room desperate. Tom was already there, leaning in the doorway, blocking it. No flashlight, no theatrics. Just his voice in the half-dark. You're upset. That's normal. But you're safe here. I made sure of it. Let me out, Tom. I can't do that. He took a step closer. Not while it's dangerous outside. You don't see the threats like I do, the vulnerabilities. I watch them for you. He reached out and touched my hand. His fingers were cold. I know you feel it too, the way I take care of things for you. The system works. You just have to trust it. I yanked my hand back. He didn't react. He just stood there, filling the doorway, his face placid. You should sit down. It could be hours. I retreated to my cubicle, mind racing. The lockdown protocol. He'd installed it. He'd isolated me. And he'd done it all through legitimate channels, weeks in advance. How do you report a trap that looks like a security upgrade? Then I remembered. The fire alarm. It was a hardwired system, separate from the electronic locks. I waited until I heard Tom's footsteps receding toward the server room, probably checking his protocol. I grabbed my chair, carried it to the nearest pull station, and slammed the lever down. The alarm shrieked. The sound was deafening. I ran to the front doors, not knowing if they'd open. But the alarm had a failsafe. All locks released on fire detection. The door clicked open. I burst out into the rain and didn't look back. Tom wasn't arrested. When the police arrived, he was sitting calmly inside, explaining that the lockdown was a beta test that had malfunctioned. He showed them the documentation he'd created, the emails to management about security enhancements they'd never read. He'd covered his tracks. It wasn't assault. It wasn't even illegal, just a system error during a storm. They couldn't prove intent. He was fired, of course, but he left on his own terms, quietly, with that same contained expression. I quit a week later. Not because of Tom, but because of the lock. Every time I badge in now, I wonder who holds the override. Every emergency protocol feels like a threat. I work in a building with windows that open and doors that can't be centrally controlled. I still check the fire alarm location in every room I'm alone in. The most dangerous people don't need chains or jammers. They just need access, and a reason you'll sound crazy if you try to explain what they did. Tom believed he was protecting me. That's what I can't forget. The sincerity in his voice when he said I was safe. He wasn't a monster. He was a guardian who decided I belonged in a cage. I was 17 the summer I got my first job at the local grocery store in my quiet Vermont town. It was typical small-town employment, bagging groceries, stocking aisles, dealing with eccentric regulars. It was simple, and I felt safe. I spent most of my time in the main store area, but then they hired Sean for the dairy section. He was 24, quiet, and possessed the kind of awkwardness that didn't invite pity, but anxiety. He wasn't overtly threatening, but his presence was a creeping discomfort. He'd stand too close, hovering just behind my shoulder while I stocked milk or reorganized shelves, close enough that I could feel the weight of his gaze. He never initiated a proper conversation, but he would latch onto anything I said, amplifying my simple comments into long, strange monologues. I maintained a wall of polite distance, but I could never shake the feeling of being watched. The store had a group chat for shift coverages and complaints, and Sean quickly found me there. His work questions morphed into personal ones. What music did I listen to? Did I have weekend plans? The questions escalated into something worse. He started calling things I did cute. Not me directly, but things around me. "That's a cute way to organize the yogurt," he'd text after I'd sent a photo of a display I'd fixed. "Cute playlist on the store speakers today." The word felt like a tiny violation every time it appeared, giving him an escape route if I ever tried to complain. I was 17, he was 24. The age gap was a warning sign I couldn't ignore, so I started ignoring him entirely, leaving his messages unread. The breaking point arrived during a Thursday afternoon break. I was in the tiny employee break room, enthusiastically discussing the new season of Stranger Things with two cashiers. I was obsessive about the show. I'd been binge-watching it privately on my laptop in my bedroom with headphones, the door locked. Sean sat silently in the corner, eating his lunch, completely detached from our conversation. Then, in a pause after I'd mentioned a specific plot point, he looked directly at me and said, flatly, "You like Stranger Things, right?" The room went silent. My sandwich stopped halfway to my mouth. I had never told anyone at work about that show. No one. The realization that he knew was like ice water hitting my spine. He had gathered private, unnecessary data on me. He knew because he'd been watching me more closely than I could have imagined. I stammered a response and left the room. The image of his calm, knowing smile burned into my mind. 3 nights later, at 2 a.m., the dread materialized. I woke to a sound, a soft, rhythmic scraping against my bedroom window. Scrape, tap, scrape. Not the frantic rattling of a branch, but a deliberate, slow contact. The air was dead still that night. There was no wind. I pulled the blanket over my head, heart hammering against my ribs, willing the sound to be anything other than what I feared. After 10 minutes, it stopped. I didn't sleep again until dawn. In the morning, I checked the glass and found a smudged handprint low down on the pane. Not at the height of a pranking kid, but where someone standing on the ground would place their hand for balance. That weekend, my panic reached a critical mass. When Sean messaged me again, asking if I was okay, I finally snapped. I texted him back, my fingers shaking. "Sean, stop contacting me. I'm not interested. This is making me uncomfortable. This ends now." His reply was instant. It was not anger, not denial. It was a promise. "Okay, good luck changing your address." I stared at those 5 words, realizing that all the awkwardness, all the hovering, was just camouflage for something cold and calculated. He had proved that he knew exactly where I lived and felt confident enough to use that knowledge as leverage. I immediately screenshotted every one of the 37 messages and went straight to my manager. My manager was shocked. Sean was called in, and 40 minutes later she confirmed, "He's gone." The police were involved and a restraining order was filed. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. The aftermath was worse than the stalking itself. For months, I lived in a state of paralyzing paranoia. Every car that drove slowly down my quiet street, every unidentifiable caller, every shadow outside my window was him. I checked the locks obsessively, 3, 4, 5 times before bed. I stopped answering calls from unknown numbers. I was hyper-aware of every person who walked too closely behind me in the store, and every window at night felt like a spotlight on my private life. My mom noticed I was withdrawn, quiet, perpetually anxious, but she couldn't understand that the fear was permanent. Sean had taught me that the kind of guy people make excuses for, the socially inept one, is sometimes the most calculated predator. I quit that job, moved to a different town, but the paranoia followed. I still look for his car every time I drive past the old grocery store. I probably always will.